The morning air was thick with silence, the kind of silence that screams grief. Two children no older than 9 and 11 sat side by side on a hospital bench, their eyes hollow, their hands tightly clasped together. The younger one's voice trembled as she whispered to a nurse, "Our mom died this morning, we have nowhere to go." She didn't cry. She had already cried all night. Just then, a man in a crisp suit stepped out of a nearby elevator, a millionaire on his way to finalize a deal that would shape his legacy. But when his eyes met theirs, he froze. In a single moment, his life took a turn even he couldn't predict. And what he did next would leave the entire world speechless. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, share with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe our channel Kindness Talks for more real-life inspired emotional stories too. It was just past 6:30 a.m. when the beeping machines in room 208 finally went quiet. Margaret Ellis, a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep her children fed, had been fighting late-stage cancer for months. She had spent her final days worried not about herself, but about where her kids, Ava and Liam, would go when she was gone. Their father had left years ago, and there were no relatives willing to take them in. She kept her pain hidden behind a smile, whispering to her children every night, "God will send someone." That morning, Ava clutched her brother's hand, both sitting beside their mother's lifeless body until the nurses gently led them away. The hospital's social worker hadn't arrived yet. The staff was kind but overwhelmed. The kids sat quietly in the hallway, unnoticed by most, except for one man. Samuel Whittaker was a billionaire, tech mogul, investor, and CEO of Whittaker Solutions. He wasn't supposed to be at the hospital that day. He was only visiting because his driver had hit a pedestrian a few blocks away, and out of guilt, he had come to check in on the victim. He hated hospitals. They reminded him of his own painful past. As he stepped off the elevator, his phone buzzed with updates from his board. But his eyes were drawn to the 2 children on the bench. Ava looked up at him. There was something haunting in her expression. It wasn't just sadness. It was a quiet kind of strength, the kind a child shouldn't need to have. When a nurse leaned in and asked if they had anyone to call, Ava shook her head and said softly, "Our mom died this morning. We have nowhere to go." Samuel stopped in his tracks. For a reason he couldn't explain, that one sentence cracked something inside him. Memories of his own childhood came rushing back. Of sleeping under bridges, of a mother who had OD'd in front of him, of cold winters and foster homes that treated him like nothing. He had clawed his way out of that darkness. He had promised himself he'd never go back. But now, looking at Ava and Liam, he saw himself. He walked over slowly and knelt down. He said gently, "I'm Sam. Can I sit with you?" The children hesitated, but Liam nodded. Sam didn't know what he was doing. This wasn't him. He was a man of logic, of spreadsheets and numbers. But something about these kids made him throw all that away. In the following hours, he sat with them, got them breakfast, talked to the hospital administration. And then, without thinking twice, he said the words that shocked even himself, "They're coming home with me." The media caught wind of it within days. "Billionaire takes in orphaned children from hospital bench" was splashed across every headline. But for Sam, it wasn't about publicity. It was about healing something inside himself that money never could. At first it was awkward. His mansion was enormous, sterile, lonely, filled with things but no warmth. Ava was quiet, cautious. Liam wouldn't sleep without a nightlight and needed to hear a bedtime story, something Sam hadn't read in decades. He tried. He failed. He tried again. One night, Ava knocked on his office door. "Mr. Sam," she whispered, "you don't have to keep us if it's too much." He looked at her, tears stinging his eyes. "I didn't bring you here to do you a favor," he said. "I brought you here because I think I was meant to. You're not a burden. You're a gift I didn't know I needed." As weeks passed, things changed. Sam started coming home early from work. He cooked, or tried to. Burnt pancakes became their inside joke. He went to parent-teacher meetings, sat in the back of dance recitals, and clapped louder than anyone else. The mansion began to feel less like a showroom and more like a home. But not everyone supported his decision. His board members worried about distractions. His girlfriend, a glamorous model, walked out, claiming he had changed too much. One of his investors even threatened to pull funding unless he got back to being the old Sam. But Sam didn't flinch. He had already been that man. He didn't want to be him anymore. Then, just as things were settling, tragedy struck again. Ava collapsed at school. She was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. Treatable, but expensive and emotionally draining. Sam stayed with her every night, reading her books, whispering that she wasn't alone. One night, as she lay in bed hooked to machines, she looked up at him and said, "You know, I think my mom asked God to send you." The Sam smiled through tears. Maybe she did. A year later, everything had changed. Ava recovered and grew stronger. Liam started calling Sam Dad without even realizing it. Sam adopted them legally, changing their last names to Whitaker. And Sam, he became more than a businessman. He started a foundation in their mother's name, the Margaret Ellis Trust, offering safe housing and education for orphaned children across the country. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Ava stood beside him, now 12, holding his hand tightly. A reporter asked her, "What would you say to other kids who feel alone?" She looked into the camera and said, "Sometimes, when life takes everything from you, it's only because it's about to give you something even greater." The audience fell silent. Even Sam had to turn away to hide his tears. This wasn't a story about wealth. It was about heart, about how broken pieces can fit together to make something whole. Sam had built an empire, but it wasn't until he opened his heart to 2 orphaned kids that he discovered the true meaning of home. And in the end, it wasn't just the kids who were saved, it was him too.